This is our introductory lecture video on the Elizabethan Renaissance. The 16th century was the time of the Tudor sovereigns. Henry Lancaster had become Henry Tudor with the defeat of Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field. We remember that Henry Tudor had married the widow of his enemy, Elizabeth York, and established a new dynasty using an older last name as the new family name. York and Lancaster, because of all their wars they had and the Wars of the Roses, had just caused too much trouble. And so he came up with a new family name. But the Tudor government meant a very strong central authority. This was also a time of increased education. About 30% of the people were literate in the early 1400s. 100 years later, 60% of the people were literate. This is a time also of increased exploration. We know Columbus and John Cabot. Columbus sailed to South America, North America, Hispaniola Island, as far as Cuba. John Cabot actually came to North America. We remember Spain and Portugal had just got married, and Ferdinand and Isabella had sent out Columbus, an Italian explorer. John Cabot was also an Italian explorer. Those are anglicized names for them. But King Henry VII had sent him out to explore. England at this time was producing not only wool, but also cloth. Farmlands are being enclosed for corporate farming, driving many peasants to the cities. So the city population begins to explode. No more knights in shining armor except to have your portrait painted, because now you have guns. And plate armor does not stop bullets, so why wear all that heavy stuff into battle? Now sometimes they still wore their helmets and their breastplates, because many times the firearm could get off only one shot, and then you had to pull the sword out and continue fighting. So the breastplate still came in handy, but not all the greaves, and not all the arm gear, and all the leg gear. Elizabethan education was based on the same process in the Middle Ages. If you remember our Canterbury pilgrims, the squire could compose music and draw and recite. He had been through this system. It's called the trivium and the quadrivium. The trivium were your language arts, Latin grammar, logic and rhetoric or persuasive speech class. Trivium, basic arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and even music theory was included in the quadrivium as well. The purpose was utilitarian, to train for diplomacy, to train for the professions. Henry VIII's name is associated with many historical events. The Protestant Reformation was designed to cleanse the Catholic Church of what was perceived of as moral and financial corruption. Henry VIII had written books against Martin Luther, the German Protestant leader. But he wanted a divorce from his Spanish wife, Catherine of Aragon, and the Pope would not grant him one. So he took over the English church. He nationalized the churches. Thomas Cromwell, the Secretary of State, gave church positions to Henry's loyalists. Now, although William Tyndale, a Bible translator, was persecuted, Henry eventually did authorize the Bible to be made more accessible to the public. The Renaissance is an Italian movement begun by Petrarch, emphasizing classical architecture and philosophy and learning. People at this time were very interested in global matters. Commercial rivalries began, creating a national consciousness. So not only the Protestant Reformation, not only a global consciousness, not only humanistic learning putting emphasis on us, a lot of Bible translations, a national pride. You're proud to be English, or proud to be Spanish, or proud to be French at this time. And interestingly, even some early tax-paid social programs to give war widows a pension, or old warriors got a government pension as well during this time. The monarchs are fairly easy to remember. It's Grandpa, Dad, and the three kids. Grandpa, of course, was Henry Tudor, Henry VII, his powerful son, Henry VIII, who had 6 different wives. What happened to them? Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. So all of his children were by a different mother. Under his son Edward VI, who did not live too long, Protestants flocked to England to escape persecution. But the sick young man died after only a few years as king. His radically Catholic half-sister Mary became queen. Mary wed the Spanish King Philip, and that made a lot of English people very nervous. And she killed so many Protestants, 300 in London alone, that the title Bloody Mary was given to her. Her killing of her father's archbishops and his 2 chief bishops caused the protest song, 3 Blind Mice, to be heard all over London. Many of our nursery rhymes come from English protest songs. Everyone was afraid that her husband Philip's Spanish Armada would take over England, but Mary died after only a few years on the throne. And then, of course, her sister Elizabeth, who was Protestant, began to rule. Elizabeth ruled from 1558 to 1603, a long time, many decades compared to the short rule of her brother and her sister. England was producing many literary masterpieces in songs, sonnets, and plays. We think about Shakespeare for all three types. Elizabeth was a political genius who understood the necessity of surrounding herself with very wise advisors. We know Sir Humphrey Gilbert and Sir Walter Raleigh established settlements in North America. Raleigh named the territory of Virginia after the Virgin Queen Elizabeth. Her explorers tried to find new passages to Russia for trade. We remember Sir Francis Drake for circumnavigating the globe and also for pillaging Spanish towns for treasure. Her former brother-in-law Philip grew very weary at those attacks. Plus, he also objected, as did the Pope in Rome, of Elizabeth's execution of one of her cousins, Mary Queen of Scots, for plotting against her. And so Philip was given the go-ahead to invade England. The English, of course, won when the Spanish ships were crashed by a storm on the coast of Scotland and Ireland. And so Elizabeth was declared the winner, that God had chosen her to be mistress of the waves. Interestingly, the very lady that she had executed, Mary Queen of Scots, had a son named James. James was Protestant, unlike his Catholic mother. And Elizabeth and the people in the Parliament decided that James would be her heir. And so King James, the Scottish king, would become the King of England and Scotland and unite the two countries together. It was a fairly peaceful transition too. But James I believed in the divine right of kings, and therefore Parliament did not favor him. If you believed in the divine right, you believe God tells you what to do and nobody else has to. And when you have a Parliament, that doesn't go over too well. So James was somewhat bigoted in his ideas. He was a strict middle-of-the-road Anglican. He didn't like the Puritan groups that had formed to try to reform the Church of England and make it less Catholic. He didn't like the Catholics, on the other hand, either. And so both groups did not like him, and many of them hopped on boats, and you know where they came to. They came to America and established Jamestown and a number of other settlements as well. So we start having some of our early English-American history as well, Anglo-American history. So here we go. Jamestown, Virginia, founded in 1607. King James is remembered primarily, though, for the authorized or King James Version of the Bible. He got a committee together of over 30 people, and they worked at different colleges to translate various books of the Bible into a new readable translation. In 1620, of course, we have the Plymouth Colony. And then in 1625, King James died, and his son Charles began to rule.